Hey, so I figured I'd just record this video just to sort of go over some of the findings I found with this image extract from PDFs. Um, so the actual image extract itself is actually there's a whole bunch of different ways to do this. Um, Nothing really is that involved. Nothing really involves any crazy services or libraries. The way I've done it now is just I've just converted the PDF to HTML, and then I've extracted the image files from the HTML. Pretty basic way of doing it. Um, I did notice just now that there is a bit of an issue with that, so we might have to look at alternatives. But that's not really a big deal because there's like three different other ways to do this. This was just sort of the quickest and easiest way. So as you can see, it breaks everything up into separate images. But the thing I just realized is it actually rips out the text. So it only takes the image and not the text. And it looks like some of these images have a text overlay. So the biggest question for me then is the file that you sent me, each page that has a map, that page is dedicated to the map. There's no other content. So I'm just wondering if that's what can be expected with, even the older records. Because if that's the case, then that's really easy. Then we just take that whole page and convert it to an image. We don't really need to extract the image portion or differentiate between image and text. So I'll just sort of show you what I was working with, and just to kind of give you an idea of what I was thinking before I got your file. So I just created this little test file, and as you can see, these like super small, low resolution maps. And what I was trying to do is just basically, extract this from the PDF, and then, crop these images and then run 3AWS. And I had some pretty good success. I got your file just before I got to the cropping part, so I figured, let's find out if that's even necessary. So yeah, like I said, if the maps are encompass an entire page, then that just makes life so much easier. Basically, we just convert each page into a separate PDF, and that's really easy. If not, if we do need to extract it, it's not a lot of work. I've already sort of done, I'd say, half of the work. The only things we need to figure out still is like we would need to crop this. So what we actually end up with is like just a page without the text and just the images. So I need to figure out how to crop that. And then the other thing is if there is text that needs to be retained, that would be another thing to look at. So hopefully it is, like I said, each page is a map. Then that's great. Okay, and then the other thing is I haven't really looked too much into text, mostly because text is sort of a no-brainer. Lots of people have that use case where they need to, extract text from a library, or sorry, from a PDF. So there's like 10 different libraries that do this. So the question isn't so much can we extract the text. We definitely know, yes, it's pretty straightforward to extract the text. The question I really would need to know is, how do you want that text stored and presented? Do you need to retain any sort of context? For example, like, maybe it's in relation to something else in the page, or would it be acceptable just to have, all the text in, one blob per record called text or something like that? So, if it's just going to be all the text in one big blob, then, of course, formatted so you can read it, but, not really giving any other context to the overall document, then that's pretty easy, quite straightforward. If you want to try to retain some sort of text, then we'd have to start looking at like a database and some sort of data structure, for each document. So that's a little bit more involved. So yeah, that's that's what I'm thinking. I could do is sort of make you up a list of all the sort of tasks, and then the things that are optional or value add things, and the things that are completely necessary, and then you can sort of choose from there, because there are sort of there's probably maybe about 5 or 6 different ways you can go about this. So yeah, the other thing is I found that the recognition SDK requires you to actually upload the file to S3, which is great because we're already going to have our images on S3. That's where they're going to get dumped initially, provided we choose that route. Um, so the only reason why I haven't done that though for the demo is just because it is a little bit of work to set all that up. So just from my perspective, I don't want to put in that work if it isn't going to lead into anything. But I'll just show you here. Yeah, so detect labels. This might look like Greek to you, but what are we here? Detect label. I've just seen it. Here we go. Yeah, so detect label. So it just requires like your S3 location, and then it'll give you this sort of. I'll show you actually. So here's one of your maps. So all the maps, they all have either a map. Some have plan, diagram, atlas, but it's pretty accurate. The percentage isn't really super important. It's just that it gets picked up, and then we do some very simple programming where we just look at the results, and it does does the results contain one of these three numbers? If so, then yes, it's a map. If it's a map, then then store it in the maps folder with the rest of the record. So as you can see, here's that issue that I was talking about with the text. I just sort of noticed that was a problem now, but I don't think that would be a showstopper. Yeah, so then the other thing is in terms of like options. So we could make this a really simple thing that you run on your local workstation, and what processes the images from there, and maybe you need to know some commands, and maybe you need to babysit it a little bit. But then we could also do something, and it's not super involved, but again, like I'll sort of try to put together some high level estimates and make these things optional. But I think probably the better way to do it would be to have Amazon has a service called Lambda. And basically, Lambda is you can run code without actually having a dedicated server. And there's all sorts of different use cases for it. I use it for a few different things. But one of the sort of primary use cases for it is with S3, you can basically have like an event handler or a hook that listens. So basically, you would come here and you would upload your PDF, and then once it's received the PDF, it will actually send an event to Lambda and say, okay, I got this PDF. What do you want me to do with it? And then the Lambda function would run. So that way you could just sort of upload your files as you want, either in big batches or small batches. It would sort of be up to you on how much you want to review the logs. Do you want to do it all in one big go? But the sort of beauty of it there is you don't really need to think about what's happening behind the scenes. You would just upload the file, let it process, and then look at the results. So yeah, I think that's probably the best way to do things. All the work's going to be in S3 anyway, so we kind of need to get our images and the PDF and everything in S3 regardless. So that's probably, I think, the best route for managing that. It's probably also going to be the most easy, user-friendly route of dealing with things. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Then the other thing is, we could do this really basic where, you end up with, let me try to show something I can compare here. What's going on? It's not working for some reason, but yeah, you could have something where you have to manually come into S3, and it has sort of like a directory like structure. Every image would have its own name, so technically you wouldn't really need a front end. I think there's a search function, but it's going to be in relation to the name versus the content. So yeah, so I mean that could work, and that could be a starting place. A more robust option would be something where we have a DynamoDB database, which S3, by the way, is also very cheap to do stuff in, and so is DynamoDB. I'm just working on a project with it right now, and it's quite great, very cheap. But basically, you would have a database structure. So with the image, you might, here we go. Yeah. So you would have something sort of like this. These might be names, and then you can search for them. That might be okay, but maybe you want to pull some metadata off the images or off of the PDF. Maybe you want to have a heading. Maybe you want to have specific fields for text or certain types of text. So if we started to get into that more data structure centric, I guess, design, then you'd probably use a database. And then what we would do is we would just store the URL of the S3 images in the database, and then you would reference that with the rest of the data that you need. And then of course, if you have a database, well, then you're going to need something to view it with. So I'm thinking, like a really sort of basic, just like a list view with a search. Maybe you want to index certain fields. Maybe there's certain things that you want to be able to query on, and maybe that's really important. So we could do that, and it wouldn't have to look amazing. We wouldn't want to spend a whole bunch of time. It would just be more, it'd be more function over form in that respect. So yeah, so like at its sort of core, this is not as hard as I thought it would be. It's actually quite easy. It's just, how robust do you want it to be? How user-friendly do you want it to be? And of course, more importantly, what's your overall budget? And then, if you can give that to me, then that kind of gives me some ideas, or I can just sort of, itemize everything for you. And, hopefully, at the very minimum is in range. And then, if you're satisfied with the results from the minimum, then you can kind of, build on top of that. That's kind of the way I like to do things, instead of, making a whole bunch of, upfront commitments and then, certain factors change down the road. So I prefer an incremental kind of approach, and that I would assume probably works best for you too. So yeah, excuse my voice too. I just got back from the dentist. That's why if I sound funny, it's because my mouth is frozen right now. Okay, man. So yeah, that's it. So let me know if this all sounds good, and if it is, then I'll actually do you up like a proper document with the hours and price and all that stuff. Okay. Okay. Cheers.